Well, as Luke tells the story, pretty much everyone had abandoned him. There wasn't so much as a single disciple close enough to even help Jesus carry his cross to his execution. Roman authorities had to enlist the assistance of an out-of-towner. All his followers had scattered like cockroaches when the kitchen lights turned on. Everyone, that is, except the women. The women were the ones who had followed him all the way from Galilee. They were the only ones who had witnessed his death to its gruesome end and seen him laid gently in a tomb that another out-of-towner had reserved for that day. And the women were the ones who, despite their grief, recognizing that there were still things to be done, went home to prepare ointments and spices that would be placed on the corpse later on. Thank God for the women. But no sooner had they finished the preparation of the ointments and spices than they realized it was the Sabbath, a day for ceasing from all activity, a day that would be marked by tears and unanswered questions and the sort of grief that racks the body and shreds the soul to pieces. But as soon as the Sabbath had passed, at the breaking of dawn, in fact, and as soon as they could pack up everything, they set out for the tomb, probably expecting that they would have to rope someone into rolling away the stone for them. They were stunned to find it already rolled away. They slowly crept closer, maybe expecting to catch a glimpse of the grave robbers, or at the very least expecting to be greeted with the foul odor of a corpse that had begun the process of decay. Instead, they were greeted not with a decaying corpse, but a couple of well-dressed men in the empty tomb, asking them why in the world they would expect to find Jesus here of all places, and pointing out to them that he had risen. Well, now this was certainly some headline news that was worth sharing. So they hightailed it back to the disciples, those brave and devoted souls, and broke the news to them. The men, though, assuming the women were just delusional, dismissed their story as nothing more than an idle tale. Some later manuscripts, probably thinking that this sort of ending to the story made the disciples appear worse than they already did, tossed in an extra verse about Peter running to the tomb, looking inside, confirming the women's story, and then going home. And that's the end of our story. Or at least, that's the end of the story for many people. It's a story with a happy ending because our hero doesn't die after all. But it's really not the end, is it? Inquiring minds want to know what happened to the women after their detailed accounts were discounted as pure and utter foolishness. Did they go back to the daily routines of life? Did they form their own support group for close encounters of the angelic kind? And what about Peter? Did his amazement lead him back to his cohorts? Or did he go home and try to forget it? And did the mystery of it nag at him and cause him to lose sleep at night? No, the story really didn't end with the resurrection of Jesus. In fact, it was only the beginning. It was the beginning of a new story for Peter and the other disciples, for Mary and all of the other women, and for you and me. You see, we are part of the Easter story whether we realize it or not. And whether we accept the account as a historical fact or a metaphorical tale embedded with deep spiritual truths. Every time we enter the tombs of our lives, Every time we are confronted with the darkness of chaos and uncertainty and heartache, we write a new chapter in the Easter story. Writer Nora Gallagher says, every time we have the courage to step into the empty tomb, into the new life that is not familiar to us yet, we practice resurrection. Whether or not we believe in the resurrection makes no difference if we don't make a different life. It takes courage to step into the darkness and to face the empty tombs of our lives, the defeats and frustrations, the suffering and catastrophes, the tragic deaths and prolonged illnesses, the loneliness and feelings of hopelessness. And it takes courage to practice resurrection too, to embrace a new outlook on life and a new hope. Not only the women and not only Peter, but all of us have the opportunity to practice resurrection in our lives. When against all odds, two women or two men make a public declaration of their love to each other, they practice resurrection. When trans men or trans women are willing to risk their very lives in order to present themselves authentically, they also practice resurrection. Every time a bullied student decides against suicide, they practice resurrection. When a church congregation reaches out to the hungry and homeless, they practice resurrection. And when the unemployed refuse to give up looking for work, they practice resurrection. When the addict or alcoholic is clean and sober for just one more day, they too practice resurrection. Every time we love someone who doesn't deserve it, or forgive someone who we would really rather not, or laugh out loud for no reason at all, or sit quietly with someone who is in pain, we are practicing resurrection in our lives. We are daring to hope when all hope seems lost and doing our part to make sense of the senseless. The only way that Peter and Mary and the others could make sense of the resurrection was when they allowed it to reach into their lives and transform them. Luke's gospel goes on to share some of those transformation stories. The resurrection continued in their lives, and in the weeks to come, we'll examine a few of them. Easter is not a once-a-year day when we dress up and go to church whether we want to or not. It's not about exuberant music or lilies decorating the sanctuary. It isn't about baked ham for dinner or Easter egg hunts for the children. Easter isn't about soft bunnies or chocolate. And it's more than a story about the resuscitation of a man who died. It's nothing unless it inhabits our own lives, unless we practice resurrection for ourselves. There is a sort of power that comes in deciding to practice resurrection instead of the alternative. There is power in allowing it to transform our lives. The real power of the Easter story is not what happens inside this church today, but what happens when we turn and leave this place. Will our lives be the healing agents of the world? Will we transform the world as we ourselves experience our own transformation? We are as much a part of the story as Peter and Mary. The story may have begun at the tomb, but it continues to this day when we practice resurrection in our everyday lives, when we gather our courage and make the decision to rise above hopelessness, when we assemble each week with others and break the bread and share the cup, when we draw from their strength and make it our own. That's what it means to be an Easter people. It means choosing to hope when all hope seems to be lost. It means choosing to forgive when every fiber of our being aches for revenge. It means allowing others to love us until we can finally learn to love ourselves. And that's what comes out of this supernatural story, which seems too bizarre to even be true. That's what practicing resurrection in our everyday life is like. May each of us practice until we get it right. Amen.